So I, without further ado, welcome Mike Palecek to be speaking with us tonight. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. Good evening, sisters and brothers. It's my pleasure to bring you greetings of solidarity on behalf of 52,000 members of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers from right across this country. And I think it's an important time for the labor movement and for your union and my union in particular with what we're facing in the next little while. I think this is an important time to be building links of solidarity, to be standing together, and to be having exchanges. I'm quite honored to be the first sort of guest speaker at one of these events, and I hope that there will be more of this in the future. There will be more sort of collaboration with the wider labor movement as a whole, because really our powers lie together. All of the unions in this country are stronger together. I think I'm incredibly happy to be addressing you in the post-Harper era. As a lot of you know, my union and postal workers in particular were one of the first to be attacked by the Harper government. And certainly they never let the pressure up. They just kept coming with more and more and more further attacks, further cuts throughout their entire mandate. Of course, that's still continuing. We have a new government in place, and we're trying to see which direction that's going to head. Everything's still up in the air. We haven't managed to meet with the new minister yet. We're hoping this will be a new change in direction. But, of course, we still have a whole bunch of challenges sitting in front of us. You know, Emmanuel said that I was elected as the youngest president in the history of the union. And the running joke is that by the next convention, I'm going to be the oldest president. I'm starting to feel that. As you know, there were the major attacks against the Postal Service in general and the service that we provide to Canadians across the country. But even before that, there were massive attacks against our members, against beginning at the bargaining table, where they asked for massive concessions, and then the previous government locked us out, and then legislated us back to work with an absolutely draconian bit of legislation, which would have enforced massive cuts onto us. And they used that entire process to extract major concessions from my union in the last round of bargaining. One of the things that we lost was our paid sick days, our paid sick leave. And we lost that in favor of the STD plan. I hear some giggling, yeah. We made some of the same jokes. You know, don't get in bed with management, you'll get an STD. Well, you know, I can say quite honestly, after having experienced this for a couple of years, it's been an unmitigated disaster for our members. The attacks, losing the sick days and having them replaced with a short-term disability plan has been absolutely horrendous. Because what we've found is that, number one, people have had their sick time reduced. You know, they get 7 days a year now instead of 15, and they're non-bankable. Whereas before, people could bank their sick time, and then if they came down with a serious illness, they would be able to use that time that was in the bank. Well, now, of course, people are being forced to take their 7 days and then apply for this short-term disability plan. And what we're finding is that this plan is not... our members are having difficulty even getting what they were promised, even getting which was subpar to begin with. Because all of this is being handled by a third-party insurance company. And to be completely clear, any insurance company handling your disability plan, they're not in business to pay your benefits. That's not how they make money. They're in business to try and find reasons to screw you out of the benefits that you're entitled to. That's how they make their bottom line, and we've seen that. We've lived it for the last few years. Well, we're going back to the bargaining table with both of our major collective agreements. The rural one is expiring at the end of this year, and our urban one is expiring at the end of January. And we're going back there. One of our major demands is we want our sick leave back. The short-term disability plan is going to be scrapped. And I know that that you folks are facing those same threats. Hopefully it'll change with the new government. I wouldn't hold my breath on it. But let's be optimistic here. PSAC is facing much of the same with some of their components. We know this, that right across the public sector, they're targeting sick days. I can tell you from an experience, you can't give in on this. It's been horrible for our members, horrible. And I could tell you horror story after horror story, and it wouldn't fully convey how bad this has been. I've talked to members who are in late stage terminal cancer, who are on the verge of losing their homes because their short-term disability plan has been denied, and they're sitting at home without a paycheck while they're trying to fight cancer and fight the company to get the benefits they're entitled to at the same time. And I could tell you story after story about this, but I'll tell you, sisters and brothers, and I've said this before. We know that the rest of the public sector are fighting for their sick days, and from our perspective, that isn't just a struggle that we will support. It is part of our fight too, and we will be there to defend your sick days, come hell or high water. No matter what comes, postal workers will be standing with you on this. Because we know that if you guys lose yours, it's going to be 10 times harder for us to get ours back. We know that. So this is all part of the same fight, and it's part of the same struggle. And this is why I say that we've got to be working more together on issues like this, because the issues that we're facing are the same. The attack on public services, the attack on benefits and wages for public sector workers, the attack on job security, we're all facing the same issues. So we've got to be coordinating on this, because maybe one union at a time they can pick us off, but if we stand together, they can't come after all of us. We know that, and we know that from the history of this country, even from dealing with liberal governments. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not going to be all sunshine and roses just because the new kid on the block was elected. So, I mean, we've got to be ready to stand on our own strengths, and that's a given. But I want to talk a little bit about the campaign that we've been fighting, the whole Save Canada Post campaign, and where that's at. And I want to start by thanking you for a lot of the solidarity work that some of your union has done on this. They've been there at every demonstration that we've had. Every time we have a picket, we'll see members of CAPE standing with us, and that's really important. But this fight that we had, we knew from the beginning that it wasn't really about the precarious state of Canada Post's finances, as they were saying in the press. We knew there was never really any economic justification for the cuts that the Harper government was putting forward at Canada Post. We knew that because Canada Post is actually profitable. It hasn't taken a penny of taxpayers' money in decades. In fact, it's a source of revenue for the federal government, which over the last 20 years has returned over $2 billion in the form of taxes and dividends to the public purse. Now, you wouldn't know any of that from listening to the Conservative talking points or from listening to the Canada Post CEOs. They were all pushing this Chicken Little story, saying that the sky is falling, that we have to cut services and lay off 8,000 people, get rid of 8,000 jobs, cut the services that people rely on. We knew from the beginning that that was really a plan to privatize Canada Post. It wasn't a plan to actually fix the finances or whatever it is they were saying. And we knew that quite clearly from the way they were behaving and from documents that we got through access to information. For example, we knew that postal banking is a way that postal administrations around the world have been dealing with some of the same issues. They've been expanding into new services. Banking on financial services is a really common one. Outside of North America, it's pretty much the standard that the post office also functions as a public bank. Now that's a service that's urgently needed in this country, and it's something that Canada Post could very easily be providing. If you look at rural areas, over the last 10 years or so, the big banks have shut down 5,000 bank branches. And you have literally hundreds and hundreds of small towns across this country that are not big enough to have a single bank branch, but they do have a post office. So these communities would all be very well served by postal banking. We knew that in urban areas, you have the big banks essentially refuse to give bank accounts to the most marginalized people in our society. They won't give bank accounts to poor people. And so consequently, you have all of these dodgy check cashing operations and loan sharking operations opening up on every second street corner in cities across this country. There's no reason for that. You don't see that when you go to Britain or France or other industrialized countries. There's no reason for it, and there's no reason for it to happen here, because in this country, every Canadian citizen should have the right to a public bank account. They shouldn't be getting gouged by these dodgy operations all over the place. So this is something that's really well founded, something that's needed, something that could bring in new revenue at Canada Post, and we've been campaigning for it for years. Well, we found out only recently that Canada Post actually did a 4-year-long study on this. 4 years. They were going full speed ahead with it. They declared it a win-win situation, a proven diversification strategy. We have 100 pages of their 800-page study, because the other 700 they blacked out when they released it through access to information. But just from what is there, we can see this stuff. So we knew this was a good plan. We didn't know Canada Post was already going ahead with it. But what happened in September of 2013 is the Prime Minister's office received a report which had been personally requested from the Prime Minister for the Privy Council, to a report for the Privy Council on the privatization of postal services around the world. They studied the privatization of the Royal Mail in the UK, and they said it was a success. And then they studied the privatization of DHL in Germany, and they said that was a success. And then there was a whole section of this document which said recommendations, and it was blacked out. And it's labeled secret at the top. Well, we have a pretty good idea of what those recommendations are. 3 weeks later, the postal banking project was mysteriously canceled. And 6 weeks after that, they announced these cuts to cut 8,000 jobs across the country and cut the services that people relied on from Canada Post. So there's a pretty straight line here. We knew what their plan was. But there's something else that's really important about what's happening in the year and a half since that plan was announced, which is that we actually managed to stop it in its tracks. We actually managed to make this a major election issue and have it play a role in bringing down the Conservative government. And we did that. Yeah, it's worth applauding. And we did that through a very long campaign. We said that it was a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that was accurate. But we started by, one, trying to remobilize our members, because we had just faced this major defeat. Trying to remobilize our members, and then connect with communities, connect with our allies in organizations like this, and other unions and community groups that we've worked with, connect with the allies that we've worked with around this issue, and then find out the people who were most affected by the cuts in the services and reach out to them. And that was our starting point. And so in communities across this country, we managed to get thousands of postal workers mobilized onto this Save Canada Post campaign, saving door-to-door delivery, out knocking on doors, talking to residents, talking to the people on their routes, holding town hall meetings, putting ads in local newspapers, getting out to all candidates' meetings, doing every avenue we could come up with to raise this issue. And then we started meeting with organizations that represent senior citizens, organizations that represent people with mobility issues, with disabilities, all of the people that were most impacted by these cuts. And so it wasn't just the union standing there waving the flag saying we're going to stop these cuts, but it was the union, the workers, alongside the people who are actually relying on these services. And we built coalitions that way. We had people come in and find all kinds of different ways to help out. Now, I'm running out of time here, but this campaign, I think, remobilized our union. It got us set up for the next round of bargaining that we're heading into. But we also played a major role in defeating this government and setting the tone for the new government coming in. And we're optimistic, we're cautiously optimistic about the direction things are going to go. But 1 week after the federal election, Canada Post announced that they were halting the end of door-to-door delivery and the conversion to community mailboxes. And now we're going to push them. Now we're going to keep pushing them. We're going to push them to restore the service to the million people that they've stolen it from, and we're going to push them. The Liberals have said that they want to have a study about Canada Post, that they're going to study the issue. So we're saying to them that that's fine, but this study can't just be done in the back rooms in Ottawa and in the corridors of power. We're demanding a full public mandate review where we and the citizens of this country can have some input into the services they want their public post office to provide. So that's where we're heading now. We're going to fight to restore the service. We say that this is a major step forward for us, and there's a long way to go. But it's with the support of organizations like CAPE, of our allies in the movement, and people like you who come out to these meetings and help push for changes in this country that have allowed us to make this victory. So I want to thank you, sisters and brothers, for being there for us through that struggle. And I know you guys are at the bargaining table now, and I promise we're going to be there for you too.
Thank you, Mike.